I think the aspect of ISB that made my experience quite enjoyable was definitely the people and collaborations that I experienced. I'm a pretty passionate person about research. And so, working on a project and working on research is always like an enjoyable situation, an enjoyable challenge, even though some aspects of the actual project can be pretty frustrating. Um, but, when you do hit those frustrating patches, it does become kind of hard to find the motivation to like keep going. And so when you have situations like your results don't pan out, it's really the people who you're working with as well as the relationships that you have that keep the project going that particularly take the most value, I think. um Everybody at ISB was always great and always willing to work with me, even though like I came from a very different background than a lot of people, and especially as someone who didn't go to graduate school yet, and didn't have as much experience as say a grad student or a postdoc or even a science or senior research scientist. Um, and everyone was always willing to help me in whatever capacity I needed. And so like that included helping me come up with new ideas, troubleshooting an assay that I was running, helping me figure out how to design an experiment, or even just giving me encouragement when frustrated. There were a couple moments during my experience when my experiments weren't working, and I working with a postdoc in the lab. He always had encouraged me to keep going, and that it only takes one experiment to go right for you to get results that are meaningful. And so I never really felt like I had to go it alone while I was at ISB. um, Also, I just really liked collaboration for the sheer enjoyment of hearing other people's perspectives on research. I think this is where the interdisciplinary nature of ISB comes in like great, I guess it comes in handy greatly. And that's just because like as someone who has a math training background but has worked in biology, the way I think is a lot different than just a pure biologist or even like a computational biologist or someone who worked in physics. And it was just really refreshing to hear like how people thought about my ideas from a different perspective and the thoughts that they had in terms of new directions I could go in or different directions I could go in to make things easier for myself, or even something that might be more interesting to me, would come up in conversation that I would have never thought out of on my own. And so, I think that really played into the great creativity that ISB had. And I just always really enjoyed working with most people at the institute in general because of that. I think my lab in general made for a really enjoyable experience. I did spend a lot of time in lab performing experiments, and I think having camaraderie with some of the folks who were in the wet lab was really nice. Everybody was always friendly and kind, as I had talked about previously. In particular, the research associates who were always in lab and honestly like really worked their butts off always made me feel like I was a part of a family when I was in lab. There's some sort of like it's camaraderie, like I said before, but it's also like commisery in terms of like how hard you're working on your experiments, and when things don't go right, like there are people that can relate to you and understand what you're going through. Um, and these people also always just asked me how my research was going, but also like asked me how I was doing and how my career was panning out, and felt like they had a deep, um, I guess, respect for what I was doing, as well as like a desire to get to know me as a person rather than just as someone who was working in lab. And I had so much fun spending time with these people, um, especially when I would be in at like the very early morning hours or at late evening hours. And it made time fly by. So I think I owe a lot to the people in the Beliga lab who were constantly in lab, for helping me get through some of the toughest moments of my project over the 2 years that I was there. And so, like, some of those people would include like Renee, Marianne, Min, Deep, Wilson, and also Vivek, who was the postdoc that I worked directly with.